Good evening, everyone. We thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Peggy Gustav, and I have the distinct honor of serving as Congressman Maxwell Alejandro Frost's senior field representative. I'm also a proud Haitian American, and today's conversation is one that hits incredibly close to home for me. Like many of you, we've been on the front lines of immigration fights for years, but what we're seeing right now, without question, is one of the most harmful, targeted immigration policies I've ever witnessed. Amidst the harm, I'm also deeply appreciative and grateful for the people doing the work to shine a light, demand accountability, and push for justice. Leaders like Congressman Frost, who've been on the ground visiting ICE offices and detention facilities and bringing transparency to places like the Everglades detention camp that really rely on silence. Today, you'll hear directly from the Congressman about what he witnessed firsthand. You'll also hear from our partners from the ACLU, who will share critical updates on their legal efforts that are happening at the Everglades regarding the Everglades camp. Finally, I want to continue to tell you that our office is going to continue to push for oversight, transparency, and lasting change. Please know that we are available to assist you with any casework matters. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Congressman Frost.
Thank you so much, Peggy. Thanks for everyone who's tuning in, and appreciate you all taking the time. I'm going to pretty briefly speak and then toss it over to Amy to hear about the great work that they're doing. As many of you might have heard, over the last couple days, I've had two different oversight visits of ICE facilities, one of them being a field office, which is called the ERO here in Central Florida, and the other one being the Everglades Detention Facility in South Florida. Um, on the first visit, the reason we went into the field office is mainly a typical oversight visit just to see what's going on the inside. We've heard, of course, people have been detained at the office, held at the office for a short period of time, but held there nonetheless. And we wanted to learn more about the operations. For people who don't know, it is in the law and appropriations language passed in, I believe, 2017 or 2018 that members of Congress have to be allowed into any site being run by or for the Department of Homeland Security to hold immigrants. The language is very clear. And so whether it's a field office or an actual detention facility, we have to be let in, whether it's announced or unannounced. The unannounced visits being some of the most important ones, very similar to what I did at Baker Detention Facility about a year and a half ago. So we went over to the ERO to advocate, number one, on behalf of the pastors and groups that were in front of the office just trying to pray for people. They were being kicked off, so we advocated on their behalf, but also to see a little bit more as to what's going on the inside. We were met with a lot of hostility, and to be quite honest, the head ICE agent at that office was very disrespectful to me, asking me my age and things like that, and then at the end of the visit saying, "Well, it doesn't matter. You're a congressman. We're all friends," and had to put him in his place. I said, "We're not friends, and it does matter. I'm a congressman because I'm here to work. I'm not here to hang out. I'm here to do my job." Especially as a member of the House Oversight Committee, which has the broadest jurisdiction in all of Congress. So that was that first visit. We are happy, though, that we had some specific cases we wanted to look into that day. In between that visit and the visit to Orange County Jail, we were able to help a family get back some items that they needed. A father was detained. In his pocket, he had pretty much all of the credit cards and money and information that the family needed, and they fall on some really hard times when that father was detained and the wallet went into the ICE world. And so we're really happy we were able to get that back to the family after just about a day and a half. The next day, I went over to the Everglades facility for two main reasons. Number one, there were some specific people I wanted to meet with to do wellness checks on. We actually had a pretty long list of constituents who were in the facility, but unfortunately, because people are being moved in and out at different times, most of that list has been deported already. And so we had to start from scratch and find other people that are constituents or Floridians that are in the facility. And we had a list that we sent to the state. The state, the day before I went to the facility, confirmed that I can speak with those individuals. I connected with one of the wives of the individuals to hear a little bit about what the medical issues are, what questions they have, so I can check on their well-being and make sure they're being taken care of. The second reason I went was really to provide more oversight on the environmental impacts of the facility, and also learn a little bit more. We learned there's 336 people currently at the facility as of yesterday when I was there, and it looks to me as if, at least from a detainee point of view, that they are, we're winding down. They told me that they're losing more people than they're gaining. Now, they said it's because of the hurricanes in the Gulf, and obviously we're still awaiting a decision in the lawsuit that has been filed by the Friends of the Everglades and the Miccosukee tribe and the ACLU litigating. And so we just really, um, you know, well, and then a little bit into the visit, I learned that I wouldn't be able to speak with the people that I went there to speak with. Apparently, they weren't there anymore. So that was very disturbing that the state had told me the day before I would meet with these folks, which to me means that they were there, and then when I get there, that they've been transferred out. So there's still a lot of questions. However, I was able to get a good amount of information on the failures of the state to really protect the Everglades, whether it's missing silt fencing, whether it's leakage, where the storage of diesel, wastewater management, gas, and different things are at. This is having an environmental impact, and we'll be sharing our findings with, the ACLU and all the plaintiffs of all these cases, and hopefully it'll help future cases as well. And it's a good example of ways that elected officials can use our power of oversight to help support litigation that we might not necessarily be the plaintiff in. And I think that's really important right now with this facility, but with other facilities. The last thing I'll tell everyone is, I know everyone's talking about the Everglades, which is a horrible internment camp that needs to be shut down. But I will say that there's a lot of these ICE detention facilities that need to be shut down as well. And to be quite frank, the conditions I saw at Baker facility 2 years ago, not that it's a competition, but I would peg as almost worse than what I saw at Everglades. So there's a lot of these places that just need to be shut down, and that are privately run. Everglades is a pretty much privately run facility. It's a money racket. They are making tons of money off of it. In fact, the first time I ever went there, I saw two private planes that belonged to the executives from the private security companies and medical companies that are there. So this is all connected to this, greater goal that the Trump administration has of course, what I would say is ethnically cleansing the country of Black people and Latinos specifically, and enriching billionaires and mega corporations in the process. And what they're doing with ICE is no different. So I really appreciate everyone being here. I'm going to hand it over to Amy from the ACLU, who's been a great partner over the years, of course, on Everglades, but on Baker and other things as well. And Amy, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for your work.
Of course. Thank you, Congressman Frost, for having me as well. And thank you for visiting the Everglades and Baker and for taking these issues seriously. The ACLU of Florida has been monitoring and tracking ICE detention conditions in a variety of facilities for several years now. And as we've been reporting for years now, ICE detention, and as Congressman Frost was attesting to, the conditions of ICE detention centers across the state have been egregious and horrible for a long time. The Everglades facility is not the first bad ICE detention center we've seen. It's absolutely horrible, and people's rights are being violated every day, and it needs to be shut down. But we can't forget about all the other ICE detention centers as well. So if you think about all of the medical neglect, medical abuse, abuse of solitary confinement, retaliatory and punitive actions taken against people who are in civil detention, the unsanitary conditions, the lack of hygiene products, these are all things we've been hearing about in other ICE detention centers that are not in such remote locations as the Everglades. So you can imagine how much less accountability there is and how much less transparency there is. And so we are taking this very seriously. We're very concerned about a lot of aspects. I'm sure everyone here has heard about a lot of reports about similarly egregious conditions happening and taking place in the Everglades. And if you just Google it, there'll be a lot of news articles talking about horrible medical neglect. We've heard about hospitalizations only after other people who are detained there have to advocate for the facility to call an ambulance for someone who is passed out and unresponsive. We've heard about lack of privacy. There aren't like privacy walls around the toilets. When toilets get clogged, people have to unclog them with their bare hands. Like, it's absolutely disgusting and like unsafe and unhygienic, and it's absolutely not okay. And so as part of our efforts to try and stop the violations that are happening here, attorneys need to be able to access the facility and go in and meet with clients and have confidential attorney-client communications. These rights are protected by the First Amendment. Attorneys and clients and their prospective clients have First Amendment rights to confidential private communications. And despite this, the Everglades facility has erected lots of restrictions and obstacles, really obstructing access to private attorney-client communications. And this is really detrimental to people detained there for a variety of reasons. One main one being that people can't defend against their removal if they don't have an attorney able to talk with them and help draft their pleadings in their case and helping to defend their case. The second main reason being that we can't help litigate the conditions of confinement cases. We can't help advocate for adequate medical care and adequate hygienic products and all of these other things that we deal with in ICE detention cases and situations. And what is notable, these are all things we deal with in a lot of ICE detention centers, but what is particularly egregious at this facility is that officers have been going around convincing people to sign self-deportation orders without any chance to speak to an attorney. They don't know what they're signing. One person we heard about was told if he signed this form, he would get a blanket, and instead he was actually unknowingly signing a self-deportation order, and he was deported. There's a lot of examples like that, where people are just being deported without any kind of due process. Attorneys who are trying to schedule calls and visits and in-person visits, legal calls, trying to send legal mail, they have faced barriers at every step of the process. And so the ACLU of Florida, along with ACLU National Prison Project and Americans for Immigrant Justice, have brought a lawsuit specifically about the access to counsel issues. We are challenging the lack of outgoing confidential legal phone calls, the lack of any kind of form of legal mail process. We're challenging the lack of confidentiality and timeliness of the legal calls that they do set up. But there's a lot of issues, and there is, in effect, right now, no meaningful access to counsel at the facility. And so that's something we're actively fighting. We had a hearing on the preliminary injunction on Monday, and the court in the Southern District of Florida transferred the case to the Middle District of Florida, so the case will continue there. You may have heard in the news that the judge dismissed count 5 of the case, and I think some news articles got it wrong a little bit. He did dismiss the case, but that was because the defendants did what we asked them to do, and so that claim became moot. So we had asked them to identify an immigration court that had jurisdiction over people who are detained at the Everglades facility, so that they could actually apply for bond and get bond, because that is a requirement. They have a right to do that. And so the federal defendants did then designate Chrome Immigration Court as the immigration court with jurisdiction over the facility. So that was a win in our case, and we're glad that people can now apply for bond, but they still need to be able to contact their attorneys in the first place to do that. And I'm not an attorney on the Friends of the Everglades NEPA environmental case, but I'll just briefly state that that lawsuit is challenging the the lack of environmental protections and impact assessments that went into the hasty erection of the facility. And I think what is evident from both that case and the access to counsel case is that the state erected this detention center in a very rushed, unusual fashion, and they did not make sure everything was in place to run a nice detention center in accordance with the law. Instead, they took the land and didn't do environmental impact assessments and didn't set up ways for attorneys to access their clients before they started detaining people there. And so these are just a few of the ways that people's rights have been violated by the way the facility was set up and by the way the state rushed into this. I think I'll turn it back to Peggy for now, and then happy to answer any other questions about those cases.
Thank you so much, Amy, for that overview of all the work that ACLU is doing. I did want to put a few housekeeping tips for our attendees to feel free to utilize the Q&A portion to facilitate asking their question. I do want to indicate we are not attorneys and we are unable to answer or address any personal cases, but we do invite you to please call our office. We'll be glad to get you and provide any assistance that we can. Congressman, given your authority, but also your limitations, what are some actions like the ACLU lawsuits and courageous individuals like CC who's been stepping up with their lawsuit for TPS? Why is this so essential at this moment right now?
Well, the lawsuits are really important because number one, the usual checks that you have in government don't exist right now. Obviously, you have the entire Republican Party that is running the federal government, and the tools are limited in terms of not really oversight, but in terms of the checks Congress would usually put on an administration. And in Florida, the situation's even worse at the state level. And so what we have to really focus in on when we power map and figure out what levers of power do we have are powers of oversight and using the opportunity to be able to go into the facilities the best we can to educate the public, but also to help inform and give more information to litigation. And the litigation being, our really top tool right now. And, a lot of people don't realize this because it's like the news, it's better with doom and gloom on the news. But about 45% of all the things Donald Trump has tried to do via executive order have either been stopped, reversed, or paused. And that's because of the work that we're all doing. People who are litigating, plaintiffs, people on the streets protesting, legislators using their powers of oversight. These are the tools we have, and we have to use them at the highest levels. So that's why this is also important right now.
Thank you so much, Congressman. On June 18th, you rolled out legislation called SUDEM. I'd love for you to talk some more about this.
Yeah, the SUDEM Act is a bill that we introduced essentially to help people who are, it's to help first and foremost families of immigrants who have been taken by ICE. And what it does is mandate that when someone is detained by ICE, that immediately all the information regarding their arrest or detainment has to be put public on the website. So what facility they're being held at, what facility they're going to be sent to, use of force in the detainment, why they were detained, what was the reason or probable cause they had for the traffic stop, if it was a traffic stop, all the information that a family and that a lawyer would need being public, because part of the issue is people don't know where their loved ones are. People don't know where anyone is. People don't have all the information that they need to be able to represent themselves or to represent others, or for families to know where their loved ones are. So that's what the SUDEM Act does. It does sound like sue them, and we did that on purpose because the whole purpose is, we want to give people the information they need to be successful in the court of law.
Thank you so much, Congressman. I have a question here. What are programs that can help people who don't have any documentation to be able to find housing or get money for work?
Well, I would say as of now, I wouldn't do anything relating to the federal government, but I would focus on local organizations, and depending on how your city is or how your county is, looking into those. If you live here in Orlando, Florida, you can feel free to reach out to our office and we can see what we can connect you to. But there's great organizations locally. Unfortunately, on the, just so much federal funds have been clawed by the Trump administration, that there's a heavy lean on nonprofits, mutual aid groups, different people like that that are doing good work. But that's what that's where a lot of the focus is going to be on the housing front and things like that.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Um, I want to just segue a little bit here. There's a question here in reference to concerns that a lot of our immigrant families have in terms of they're documented, now they're undocumented under this current administration, and how they can stand to be supported, given they've tried litigation to protect them. As you all know, yesterday the Third Appeals Court indicated the Trump administration can move forward with moving forward with deportation and the cancellation of TPS rights to Nepal, Honduras, and Nicaraguans. What can we as a community do, or you as a member of Congress do to support these individuals?
Well, I think one of the first thing is we always encourage people to retain legal counsel if they can. There's great legal aid organizations here in Orlando people can connect with to get that legal counsel. And what we as an office do is we can help connect people with these organizations locally, to help see what resources that are available to them. And then, but it's a lot of the, organizations locally that, help immigrants, help Hope Community Center, Flick, Orlando Center for Justice. These are just to name a few, but unfortunately, I just wouldn't rely on the federal government for anything relating to immigration right now. And it's just, that's the situation. And so I try to be very blunt with people because right now we have people showing up for their normally scheduled meetings and being detained and being deported. So we just want to make sure we don't, we're not going to advise people on like personal on what people should personally do, but our general sentiment here is the federal government in the totality of it is being weaponized against immigrants. So you really have to lean more on local organizations and nonprofits on the resources side of things, and it's hard. I'll be honest with you guys about it. The legal aid organizations don't really have any money. They're running out of resources. And so if you are someone who has resources, please donate money to legal aid organizations like Orlando Center for Justice, or, if you're interested in helping to fund bigger things, ACLU, and just different people like that that are helping with it, because there's a huge strain on resources to help protect people. But those are some of the things that we can do to help people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Congressman. And I do want to share with the attendees that we have a great partnership here with a lot of these nonprofits and entities that are supporting our immigrant families at this time. I want to highlight a few more, but we're in no way advocating one over the other. There are a lot of work being done on the ground here, supporting with addressing our food desert situation and families needing food, such as the Daily Bread Distribution Center. We also have Catholic Charities. We have the Congressman mentioned Hope Community Center. We have our wonderful partners over at Orlando Center for Justice, Central Florida Hope Center. We implore you to please do your research, contact them. I think the work that they're doing to do all that they can, everybody's overwhelmed right now, but they're doing all that they can. And we also cannot forget the ACLU, with lawsuits all around the country, nationwide, to ensure that our current administration does not continue to go amongst our immigrant population. We have one question here, Congressman. I don't know if you may have the answer to this. What about the children recently born in the United States, basically addressing the birthright citizenship?
Um, as of now, things are fine in terms of birthright, but there's still things up in the air as well. I don't know if there's anything you want to say about birthright.
I can jump in, yeah. So I'm not one of the attorneys on that case, so I don't have all of the details, but I know currently there is a nationwide injunction in place The ACLU National and some affiliates and other partners as well filed a lawsuit with a nationwide class. So the lawsuit covers everyone in the country. And there's an injunction meaning that the federal government can't start to enforce that. Um,
Yeah,
so
so
it's
as of
paused
now,
for now.
yeah, and that's a blatantly unconstitutional thing they're trying to do. But obviously, that Supreme Court decision threw things in the air again. But we're really happy and glad the ACLU and partners were able to quickly put together a class action to protect people.
Thank you, Congressman. Um, I'd love for you to share a little bit about some of the families you've had an opportunity to speak with and meet with in reference to some of their various cases. Without speaking in detail about them, what have been the most targeted things that you're seeing here? Are these individuals that have criminal records? I know that we met a gentleman who's been here for quite some time, has 4 children. I'd love for you to speak on that and those conversations.
It's so all over the place, but I would venture to say that the majority of people don't have a criminal record, or it's some minor traffic violation, but are not violent criminals or anything like this. These are just people in our communities. These are mothers and fathers, abuelas and children, and that are being targeted, and it's horrible. And I went to our local jail here and did a roundtable with people who are being held on a detainer, which means they're being held for ICE. And we did a roundtable in the jail with them, which was really powerful. And each one of them said, "Look, I came here to work. I came here to be with my family. I feel like I am an American, and this is my country too." And what a lot of people don't realize is that it is both very expensive and challenging to have to get your status when you're in this country, and to have citizenship is the hardest one of them all. And the fact of the matter is, we have over 10 million undocumented people in this country, most of whom have been here for over 10 years. And so we have to ask ourselves the question of, how do we deal with that? Because I do agree. We shouldn't have any undocumented people in the country. And so for me, the solution is to then document them, and to make sure people don't live in the shadows, and that people feel safe so they can go to work, so they can be a part of this country, and continue to be Americans. Because remember, no matter what their documentation is, especially people who've been here for over a decade, they are Americans. They're part of our communities. They're part of our society. And I think it's really important that our government get this together. Unfortunately, there's been this pipe dream of bipartisan legislation to handle and reform the immigration system. And I just hope people have learned by now that it's just not going to happen. It's going to be a partisan solution. And so Democrats are going to have to come together and have our own solution that we push and that we pass when we have the levers of power, because the bipartisanship on this just doesn't exist right now. And you don't have to look any further than Miami, Florida, where you have 3 Cuban Republican members of Congress who, in one side of their mouth, tell people that they're going to fight for immigrants, and then the other side of their mouth is completely silent when it matters of protecting their own damn constituents. And these are people who represent tons of immigrants. So I do think that it's time, we have to have our own bold solution here that, of course, keeps people safe in our country. We already have laws on the if you're someone who's here, you're undocumented, and you hurt somebody, there's laws on the book, so you are held accountable. But the laws we don't have on the book right now is to make sure that people who have been here for such a long time, how can we get them to a path to citizenship so they can become citizens in this country, and they've been here for so long, or at a bare minimum, have the ability to work here without fear of deportation as they work through their cases, whether it's asylum or TPS or whatever it is. And so we have work to do here, and it's hard work. And but I think it's important, and we know what some good solutions are. So that's what I would say about that.
Absolutely.
If I could jump in real quick on that too. Um, Everyone in the world has a right to come to the US border and apply for asylum if they fear persecution in their country of origin. That's the US has signed treaties saying that, like, that is the law. It's not unlawful to come and request asylum. And just because you come, enter through a port of entry and request asylum, and then you're here while you wait through that process, often 5, 6, 7, 8 years, because our immigration court is so backlogged. Um, you might be here while you are technically you don't have documentation, but you're still following the legal pathway. And also for years now, our ports of entry are the places where you can cross the border legally to apply for asylum have been so backlogged. They haven't been letting people through. And so there has been a crisis at the border, but it's because of our own making in large part. And there are just less and less ways for people to come legally to the US. And so when people are here, if ICE is saying they're arresting people on an immigration charge, that's a civil charge. That's not a criminal offense. People who are held in ICE detention while they wait through their deportation proceedings, they're being held on a civil charge. It's not supposed to be prison. It's not supposed to be punitive. It's not rehabilitative. They haven't committed a crime. It's supposed to be a civil process only for people who are either a flight risk or a danger to their community. And a lot of times that's not the case for people we're seeing who are held in ICE detention. And there are a lot of alternatives to detention that cost a lot less money for the government and allow people to remain in their communities. They can continue to work and provide for their families and contribute to our communities and our economy. And so quite frankly, ICE detention is not the answer to the immigration problem right now, to the large number of people who are here undocumented. Like what Congressman Frost was saying, we need to provide pathways to documentation and to citizenship, and not just abuse people in ICE detention centers before we can deport them without any kind of due process.
Yeah. Amy, can you speak on the difficulties you face when meeting with your clients in these facilities, and what are the barriers and the process that you have to go through to kind of properly represent individuals who may be in these detention facilities?
Sure. So, with respect to the Everglades facility, I've spoken with a lot of attorneys who have submitted declarations for access to counsel case, and these are all available public records. You can look them up. A lot of attorneys have tried. So usually there's a place on ICE's website where they say, like Congressman Frost was saying earlier, you can look up your potential client or your family member, and it'll tell you what facility they're in. So if you find someone who's at the Everglades facility, there should be a phone number to call to get their deportation officer to contact them at the facility so that you can set up a legal call. But the Everglades people who are at the Everglades were just not showing up in the ICE detainee locator system at all. And there was no information on ICE's website for how to contact people, for how attorneys can set up legal calls or legal visits with people at this facility. And this is egregious for ICE. Like, this is not normal. This is a new thing that the state is claiming to be running this facility outside of ICE's discretion and everything. And so there's challenges. Attorneys face a lot of challenges trying to figure out how to contact their clients for several weeks. Several attorneys tried to visit the facility and show up for in-person visits. Usually in ICE detention facilities, you can just show up and ask to meet with your client, and you might have to wait 30 minutes to an hour depending on their availability. But then you get to meet with your client. Here at the Everglades facility, attorneys waited outside for 2.5 hours and then were told they were not allowed to meet with their client, and they had to fill out a form and email an address, send an email requesting a visit, and that someone would reply to their email in a day or two. And so that violation of access to in-person meetings was a huge barrier. And then people were not getting responses to the email address they were told to use. And so attorneys were not sure how to contact their clients at all. Eventually, the facility started responding to those emails, but they were still really delayed, and they were scheduling visits farther out. And by the time the attorney visit that had been scheduled was set to occur, the person had been transferred out of the facility. Similarly to what Congressman Frost experienced when he tried to meet with people at the facility. And also on the few occasions that people have been able to have legal calls with their clients, or like legal video calls or legal phone calls, they are not confidential. The attorneys who were basically a Zoom call with their client, the attorneys could see guards walking past their client. The client was just in a chain link fence cage, which is not anything near soundproof, and what is required for a private attorney-client communication. And when attorneys asked their clients whether they felt comfortable speaking, if they felt like they were in a private enough place to talk about sensitive matters, the client said no, they did not feel comfortable. They were not in a confidential location. And that is a huge barrier to being able to effectively represent a client who's not comfortable telling you the sensitive matters that are the heart of their asylum application, for example. And also legal mail is a really important part of representing someone in ICE detention. You need to send them documents for them to sign. You need to get them to review things like that. That's essential to representation. And right now at the Everglades facility, there's no access to legal mail at all. And when attorneys try and bring documents for in-person visits, the facility wants to review everything, and they're not allowed to read privileged communications and privileged documents, but it's just been a struggle to get any kind of documentation to clients as well. So there's a variety of barriers and restrictions inhibiting confidential attorney-client communications at this facility.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that, Amy. We have a few more moments, and I want the Congressman to make some final remarks here as we wrap up this webinar. We thank everyone for joining us. Please know that our office is here and available with constituent services to assist our constituents who have immigration concerns or have pending cases. Again, we are not attorneys, but we can facilitate communication with immigration if you have a pending case or question that we can direct you for assistance. Congressman, I'd like you to make any final remarks and then followed by Amy. Thank you.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you so much to everyone for being here. Thank you, Amy, for being here, and Peggy for putting this together. This is a very tough time right now for immigrants across the country. This is a really personal thing to me. I'm the son of an immigrant. My mom came here as a refugee from Cuba in the late 1960s. And so this is a personal fight for me, and it's part of the reason I put my full heart into it, whether it's here in Central Florida or in South Florida, across the country. And so we'll continue to fight on behalf of immigrants and immigrant families, because that is what makes our country great. Immigrants don't poison the blood of this nation. We are the blood of this nation. And even though things can seem really down right now, everyone should at least know that there are fighters on the streets, fighters in the shelters, fighters in the courtroom, in legislatures and city councils across the country that are fighting against this blatant authoritarianism and fascism that is seeking to blame the problems of our country on immigrants, on the queer community, instead of the billionaires, mega corporations, and spineless politicians that have gotten us into this place in the first place. So thank you all so much for being here. God bless, and I'll toss it to Amy.
Thank you, Congressman Frost. And I'll just add that I'm so grateful to you, Congressman Frost, for taking up this effort. I hope everyone on the call urges your representatives, if it's not Representative Frost, urge your representatives to conduct more of these visits and provide more oversight and try and hold these facilities accountable. There's a shutdown the Everglades facility petition you can sign. You can join protests and vigils that are happening regularly at the facility and across the state. There are lots of ways to get involved, and you can visit our website and the ACLU Florida's Instagram account too if you want to see more of these opportunities to get involved. But this is not a new problem, but this is an escalation of the problem, and we need to continue to push back and fight against it.
Thank you again for fighting the good fight, and have a good night, everyone.